So we'll just wait for a couple of minutes before we get started. Thank you so much, everyone. Cool. So let's get started. So before we get started, I would also like to know where all are you joining from. So if you could just also type which cities are you joining from, it will be great. We'll get to know the diversity we have on this webinar. So, okay, so we have somebody from Mumbai, Bangalore, Guwahati, Jalandhar, Pune, Hyderabad, New Delhi, Canada, great, Chennai, a lot of people, oh, Vadodara, Chennai, okay. Great. So it's a great mix. Welcome everyone on this beautiful Sunday morning, and I would like to welcome Akshat too, who's going to be part of this webinar and the main speaker of this webinar today. So before we get started, let me just give you a brief overview of some ground rules for this session. So just to make sure that the session is very organized, we want to make sure that you can put in your questions on the question answer or the chat window. We will take specific questions as and when it's in context and it's appropriate, or else we will anyway have a question answer session in the end of this session, right? So just make sure any technical issues are taken care of. If in case there's a lag, or you can just put it on the window, especially if it's something specific from your end. Let me just give you a brief background of myself. I'm Shreekala. I'm one of the co-founders of Crackverbal. I worked with HP for almost 7.5, 8 years before I was part of Crackverbal full time. I'm also part of the ISB Goldman Sachs 10,000 Women Entrepreneur Program. I also am part of the Cherry Belay Foundation, where I help women entrepreneurs with their entrepreneurship efforts. I've also been part of the applications team. I help students across for masters and MBA to apply to top schools, right? So with that, let me just introduce Akshat. Akshat Khanna is an MBA student at Rotman. I would like him to give some more background. So Akshat, would you want to just give a background about your profile?
Perfect, I'll do that. Hi everyone, hi Shreekala. So my professional experience actually rests on three distinct pillars. I graduated with a degree in electrical engineering from the College of Engineering, Pune, and started my first job at Oracle as an associate consultant. I was there for a year and a half, and that's when Amazon had entered the Indian e-commerce market. You had Flipkart and Amazon going heavy at each other, so things were heating up. I had an opportunity to join a startup in the e-commerce space. They used to sell cycling apparel and sporting goods online. And I had an opportunity to join them and head their strategy and ops division for a year, helped create India's largest online cycling company there. After that, I saw an opportunity in the performance apparel space for cyclists. I launched my own venture, ran it for 2.5 years. At the end of that, what I saw really excited me was big picture strategy. But one of the things that a startup restricted me in was the impact and the scope that I could have with whatever decision I took. And that's why I wanted to do an MBA to, just lay the foundation so that I will be able to contribute in the same capacity in a larger company. And that's why I decided to come to Rotman for my MBA.
Great. Thank you so much, Akshat. That was a great, introduction. I'm sure we are all very excited to learn a lot more about your life there. So before we get started, a quick introduction about Crackverbal. So we have been in this space helping students getting into top schools for years now. We have helped students get into, almost of the top schools, if you look at the list over there. These are our mentors. We have mentors again across geographies from top schools who help us, who help students to get into and help them with their applications to get into these top schools. So we have, again, these people are from various different industries. So somebody is from consulting, somebody is from marketing, somebody is from the e-commerce space, or somebody is from the energy sector. So the idea is to keep that mix of mentors so that we can, associate students accordingly based on their profile too and geography. Some free resources to get you started. Just make sure you join our YouTube channel. So we have a huge list of very interesting videos over there where we have essay analysis, a lot of stuff which can help you throughout your MBA journey. April is a good time to start thinking. So it's very important that you do your research very well. So make sure you make use of these research to help you with your MBA GMAT and applications. We have, so if you go to crackbubble.com/applications, there are a lot of free resources, webinars, ebooks available. Make sure you go through them too. There's also a page where we talk about the top MBA programs, and there is a very detailed analysis of each school. So if you look at this, I've just chosen a screenshot from Canada. So most of the schools in Canada are taken care of here. If you look at the right-hand side corner on YouTube, we also have the essay analysis for Rotman. This is for 2018-19. So if in the coming couple of months, you will see the latest essays also uploaded once they are out. For people who are looking at getting their profile evaluated, what you can do is you can go to crackable.com and get your profile evaluated. We can help you understand your current profile and what it takes for you to get into a top school. So make sure you get your profile evaluated by our experts. Cool. So let's get started and let's talk to Akshat about life at Rotman. So like I said, any questions, any queries, do put it in the Q&A window or the chat window. I'll be taking it as it comes. So Akshat, thank you so much for being here and for being part of this webinar. So before we get started, so Akshat has already given us a good background about his profile. So, and also of why he actually thought of started doing an MBA, right? So Akshat, when did this whole thing come up? Like what year was this? 2017? Like when did this whole, thought of doing an MBA, come up into your mind?
So honestly speaking, I didn't have any plan of doing an MBA for a very long time. I remember sometime when I was in Oracle, my parents, just put this in my head that go get an MBA. So I enrolled for the classroom courses at Crack Verbal, but I didn't end up actually attending more than half the classes. I just didn't have the motivation. But once I was able to develop a strong why MBA that I talked about during my introduction, which happened sometime during the start of 2017, that self drive and that self motivation came up, and that's when I actually started preparing seriously for the MBA. And I enrolled for the online classes because I just couldn't afford the luxury of classroom coaching while running a company, since my schedules were very erratic. And so sometime during 2017 Feb was when I started my GMAT prep.
Okay. So, being someone who's busy with your own work and preparing for your GMAT, how tough was it and how did you actually manage?
I would say it had its pros and cons. Running my own company had its pros and cons when I was preparing for the GMAT. The cons were that my schedule was pretty erratic. I wasn't sure if I'd have weekends free or would I have, a weekday or two where I wouldn't have much work to do and I could actually devote some time to my GMAT prep. So that's why I didn't feel the classroom coaching would work for me, because most of the classes were on weekends that were catering to, people doing a typical 9 to 5. The advantage of that was that I had some level of flexibility in terms of how I do my prep, how I structure my prep. I knew beforehand when workload would be heavy, when it wouldn't be. And accordingly, I was able to just prepare for the GMAT.
Great. So, Akshat, what was your score? If you could, talk to the attendees.
Yeah, so absolutely. So I gave my GMAT in June, if I'm not wrong. I started preparing in the end of February, or I would say the starting of March. So maybe 2.5 months of prep. And I got a 740 on the GMAT in my first attempt.
Great, great, awesome, awesome. So, Akshat, I have already put the link of the YouTube video where you've spoken a little bit about your pre-MBA story. But since this webinar is more about what's your life is at Rotman, right? I would like to
Absolutely.
know a little bit more about. So, what was the time frame when you actually got to know that you got an admit?
So I applied in the first round. I applied to a bunch of schools in the first round. I think 5 US schools and one Canadian school.
Mhm.
Uh, Basically, all the dream schools that I wanted to get into were the ones that I applied for in the first round itself. And I got waitlisted at one school and I got an admit from Rotman. The waitlist ended up converting in the second round, but then by then I'd made up my mind in December itself. December 2017 is when the results came out. So that's when I ended up actually making my decision.
Okay, okay. So, was there any kind of pre-MBA work study that you did before you got into started your school?
Pre-MBA study, not so much. So I have a friend of my father's who's a professor at IIM Ahmedabad, and I just reached out to him after I got an admit that,
Okay.
what would you recommend and how would you recommend I prepare for what lies ahead during the MBA program? And he basically asked me to focus on two basic fundamentals. One was speed reading. So he asked me to buy that Norman Lewis book on speed reading, which is what I ended up doing. And I also had to read the book Word Power Made Easy.
Mhm.
So basic fundamentals, just so that you have to read a lot of material while you're in the MBA program, especially when you're reading cases and research papers and whatnot. So just so that you don't spend too much time doing it and you're actually efficient with it was why he recommended that. And the second thing he recommended was getting comfortable with Excel, pivot tables, macros. Some of them do it at work, some don't. I didn't use much of all that. So that was something that I focused on. That's it. Nothing related to the MBA program or courses per se or anything. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So, you started your course, somewhere in the month of September. Like, when does the course commence?
So Rotman actually has a pre-MBA program in August, which
Mhm.
basically caters to uh, a pretty wide range of people. So they have four core courses then, which is one in maths, one in statistics, one in English, and one in finance and one in accounting. Sorry, five courses. So there are a bunch of them which are catering to people who come from an arts or a non-engineering background who haven't been in touch with maths. So you would end up taking the maths fundamentals course or the statistics course just to make yourself comfortable with what lies ahead. I ended up taking the finance and the accounting courses. So that helped me get up to speed. So I was doing that in August uh, when I came here. I came here, I think, on the 2nd of August. And the first 15 days I spent just brushing up and gaining that foundations in finance and accounting so that I can hit the ground running when the term actually starts.
Right. So, was it difficult for you to brush up on finance and accounting since you were not never a accounting student or a finance student?
Not actually. I think more than being a finance or an accounting student, as long as you're comfortable with math, you should be fine. There's nothing that a commerce student or a CFA level 3 student would have an edge over you in terms of the way you can perform in an exam or in a course here compared to how they would perform. So I don't think you have a disadvantage. Yes, they would have a minor leg up in certain courses, the same way I, as an engineer, had a minor leg up in courses like statistics, where I tended to have to prepare less and study less than they had to. So eventually it all balances out.
Okay, okay. So, the first week that you were at Rotman, right? So, what is the class size? Like, how many people and what is the kind of diversity that you have in the class?
So we have my batch is actually a batch of 334 students. So it's pretty diverse. Like if you just go and Google most multicultural city in the world, Toronto is the first name that ends up popping up, and that's a fact that's even represented in our classroom. You have a 60-40 split when you look at domestic versus international students. You have people from you have people from 40 different countries, 40 different nationalities in our class. So there is a lot of diversity. I would say more than just numbers in terms of different nationalities and whatnot. There's a lot of diversity in thought. You have people coming from different backgrounds. You have somebody who's played hockey in the National Hockey League here. Last year, you had somebody who's played basketball in the NBA. So you have a lot of diverse people. You had somebody in our batch who's actually served in the Canadian Armed Forces in Afghanistan, in Lebanon, in Iraq, and now he's decided to do an MBA. So this actually adds a lot of value when it comes to your in-class experience and in-class discussions.
Okay, okay. So, how was your first week at Rotman? Because this year, I'm sure Rotman has come across one of the top schools in Canada, and getting into Rotman is, also something that people really aspire to, and really, really tough to get in terms of the application. So, how was, the first week once you got there? It was one of your dream schools. What did you actually go through, and what were something interesting, about your first week at Rotman?
So, like I told you, I actually came before the pre-MBA program. So when I landed here, the program wasn't to start for another 20 days. So when I got here, I was just getting over the jet lag. The school's located right in downtown Toronto, so you have a lot of sightseeing to do in and around. It's a pretty walkable city, so that's what I used to do. So I used the first a week or two just to settle into the environment, and that is something I'd recommend every international student do. Uh, Considering the fact that it's a shock. Let's be honest. You're coming to a new country, you have to start from scratch. It's not easy, and if you just come, a week or less than a week before the academic program starts, it's really hectic, and I wouldn't recommend that. So that's something that I did, come early, and this is something that even the upper year batches are going to drill into every incoming batch. One of the most interesting things that I find about my class here is how my peers end up balancing competitiveness with collaboration. Uh, Very early on in school, you realize that everyone in your batch is smart. Yes, you were competing with, say, 4,000 different applicants when you were submitting an application, but that 4,000 has now been reduced to a batch of 330, and now everyone here is competing to get that A grade in a course or win that next case competition. Uh, so while there is a lot of competition that you see around here, people are really collaborative. Very early on, everyone realizes that, pardon my language, but assholes don't really do well in business school. Uh, once you get, yeah, once you realize that you don't have that support system around you, which you will need in the first year, considering how grueling the program gets, it gets really difficult.
So, how's your schedule over there? Do you get time to pursue, I remember, you were a cyclist and you enjoyed that, a lot when you were back home. So do
Yeah.
you get time to pursue your other passions too, while you're at the business school?
Uh, Not as much as I would like, to be honest, but I'm not complaining. I would say there are four different verticals that people end up having to balance at business school. You have academics, then you have your career. Career is basically you going out there and finding an internship or finding a job, which involves a lot of networking, building those meaningful relationships. Then you have your social life, which is your different clubs at Rotman. Uh, and then you also have your own personal health and well-being. So it can get pretty tricky balancing out all these four aspects. It's easy to make time for two, maybe best case scenario three. So depending on what part of the semester it is, you end up having to pick and choose. But that's fine. That's a part and parcel, and I think it teaches you a good lesson on what you need to prioritize and how you need to prioritize. That's something I really take out of my first year experience at preschool.
Right, right. So, in terms of the study methods, right? Like, how does it actually happen? So, when you have a class, like, what is the kind of faculty that you have, and what is their background, and what are their teaching methods? I'm sure everyone would be interested in understanding, how it actually happens there at B school.
Absolutely. So one of the things that really stood out to me when I came here to Canada, and I'm comparing it with the teaching methodology that I saw during my undergrad, was how it is just the attitude of the professors. There's no, this glass wall that I'm a professor and you're a student. Uh, they're really accomplished people. You have some of the best thought leaders in their respective fields. It's a top ranked university. If you think about the University of Toronto as a whole, it's one of the top 20 universities in the world. So you really end up attracting really good teaching talent here. And that ends up reflecting even in the classroom. You have a really good dynamic between a lot of the professors and the students here. It's a lot of two-way traffic. It's not just the professor teaching you a bunch of stuff and you making notes, going back, learning it, coming back and regurgitating it during the exam. It's a lot of two-way traffic. It's also the fact that you have peers who come from so many different backgrounds. Everyone ends up contributing to the class discussion, and it makes for a really rich environment. Besides that, when you think about, I think different B schools have a different approach when it comes to case-based methodology versus classroom teaching. Rotman's got a mix of both. They don't prefer any particular teaching style. Depending on the course and depending on what the professor prefers, you might end up doing, the course might end up being completely case-based, or it might be the regular classroom teaching that we used to see during our undergrad days in India.
Okay. Okay. So, how does the grading system work? So is it based on some assessments you have every semester, or how does that work?
So Rotman's actually one of the most academically intensive MBAs in North America. And why do I say this is because of how Canadian schools are designed. So it's the best Canadian school. So within Canada, it is really competitive. Now, if you look at North America, most of the US schools, I would say 99% of the US schools out there have a grade non-disclosure policy. What that means is that when you're applying for a job, be it an internship or whatnot, recruiters are not allowed to ask you your GPA, and you are not allowed to tell them your GPA. So there's a grade non-disclosure. Whereas at Rotman, there is no such grade non-disclosure. No Canadian school has that. Every recruiter knows your grade, and you are expected to tell them your grade. And basically, recruiters end up using your GPA to shortlist candidates. So that ends up creating a very competitive environment out here in terms of people actually focusing on academics, people actually coming to class, learning, and drawing something tangible out of it. So that's one clear distinction that people have to understand when it comes to US schools and Canadian schools. If you want an MBA program to be relaxed, I wouldn't recommend coming to Rotman because it's really intensive. And it's something that no matter how much the upper years drill into us, you don't realize until you come here. And this is something that's very particular to the first year. The second year eases up significantly, but yeah, during the first year, you're always on your toes. So yeah, that is one thing that I would say. Your first year also comprises of all mandatory courses. You aren't allowed to choose electives besides in your fourth term in the first year. So that is another difference between your first year and second year. In the second year, you get to choose from a bunch of 90 plus electives. So yeah, so that's how the structure is like here.
Right. So in fact, maybe in the first year, you make sure that you are as fast with, the other candidates who are as part of your class. And then the second year, because you've already been there for a year, you get used to it and now it looks easy maybe, right?
Not exactly. Like it's just the way the program's designed. So the first year is hectic. Like everyone says that, even the professors acknowledge the fact that the first year is designed to be hectic, and you have a bell curve grading. Unlike in the second year where you don't have a bell curve, where professors are a bit more lenient with the grading. So it's just the way the program designed. The first year is intensive. Also the fact that, the GPA you get in the first two terms, which is your first semester, ends up determining, it becomes very important for your internship recruitment, because companies start coming in January and your term two gets over in December. So you do want to keep a decent GPA, like a 3.7 plus GPA if you want a job in consulting or finance.
Right. So how does the internships work, and when do they get started? Like, is it immediately after the first year, or how does that work?
So Rotman's got a pretty unique structure when it comes to the way the internship program is actually conducted. So they have something called the flexible internship program, where students are allowed to intern any time during the second year, either in the summer term, in the fall term, or the winter term. So the summer internships are pretty common, where you finish your first year and then you start your internship in May, and you're done by August 10th. And then your second year starts in September. But if you don't find something interesting in the summer term, Rotman has allows you the flexibility to intern either in the fall, which is between September and December, or in winter, which is between January and April. So this is how the internship structure is designed here. However, I would say that most of the students end up finding an internship in the summer itself. Like last year's, based on last year's statistics, out of the 328 odd students in the batch, 250 interned in the summer. Only 6 ended up interning in the winter. The rest of them interned in the fall.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great. So in terms of, so you went there on a student visa, right? So how does the visa thing work? So I guess Canada has a stay back option, right? So which is depending on the number of years of study. So how does that work, especially when it comes to an MBA from Rotman?
Absolutely. So that was one of my biggest draws when it came to coming to Canada. The fact that I wouldn't have to worry about an H-1B lottery, and my path towards getting a Canadian permanent residency, or even, if someone's looking at getting a Canadian citizenship, is pretty straightforward here. This is how it works. So you come here on a student visa, and once you finish your MBA program, you move to a work visa. So your work visa is valid for 3 years, and you can work at any company wherever you want. Unlike the US, where companies have to sponsor your H-1B, here companies don't have that issue. So they are uh, they're pretty reasonable when it comes to recruiting international students. They don't discriminate in any way, even if there's a lot of soft discrimination that international students see in the US. You don't see any of that here in Canada. If you're good, they are going to hire you. No questions about that. Also, once you graduate, you can actually apply for a permanent residency. You end up collecting enough points, considering the fact that you have graduated from a Canadian university. You give your IELTS exam. You have enough points to actually end up applying for a permanent residency. If you get your permanent residency, then within 4 years, you get your Canadian citizenship. So it's pretty much straightforward. Unlike that's the thing about Canada. A lot of people don't understand that this country actually needs people. They have an aging population. Their average age is 40 plus. If they don't have talented people coming here working in these high paying jobs, how are they going to afford paying the pension of all of these retirees out here? So they are actually looking for people who come here and work in these high paying jobs, because these are the people who end up paying the most taxes. So there's absolutely no discrimination here from an immigration standpoint, or even from the standpoint of finding an internship or a job.
Oh, okay. So in terms of, so Toronto is an English speaking city, right? So what about, the other parts of Canada? So, in terms of your classmates, right, do they look at, other cities also as an option to go ahead and work there?
When it comes to Rotman, I would say most of us look for jobs in Toronto. It's also because Toronto's got the biggest economy in Canada. It's literally 20% of Canada's GDP. And that is considering the fact that you have the oil belt in Alberta and Calgary and whatnot. So most of the MBA's jobs are in Toronto, be it the finance jobs or the consulting jobs. Some of the tech jobs might be in Vancouver, but I would say 90+% of our batch ends up finding jobs in Toronto itself. You have a French-speaking part of Canada, which is Quebec. You have Montreal there. I think Montreal's got a P school, McGill, if I'm not wrong.
HEC.
Yeah. So there's HEC Montreal, and I think there's McGill too, right?
Yes, McGill too.
Yeah. So McGill's better known. But the thing with Montreal is that it's a much smaller economy. It's a tighter economy, and I know people who are studying in McGill. Most of them try looking for jobs in Toronto itself. So I think Rotman's got a really good location advantage that way.
Oh, okay. So, in terms of, so when you say, the visa options, you already, so 3 year, you can work there anyway as a work visa. So after 3 years, you can actually, manage a citizenship. Is that how it works?
You can actually apply for your permanent residency, which is equivalent to a green card in the US once you graduate from here. You don't even need to wait for working for 3 years. So once you graduate, the Canadian immigration has something called an express entry program. you end up accumulating enough number of points to actually get through the express entry program, and you get your citizenship. So you get your green card equivalent, which is your permanent residency here within a year of your graduation.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So, your course finishes this year, so to next year, right?
Yeah, my course finishes next year. My
Next year.
course finishes in 2020. Yeah.
2020. Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So, overall, so I just want to give a brief background, on our association with Akshat too. So, apart from the Gmat part, Akshat was also mentored by Arun, for his application. So, Akshat, one difference I wanted to ask you, with respect to your whole, application thing, since we've covered most of your life at Rotman, what I will be doing is I'll be taking up questions slightly later, because I see a lot of people asking me questions more about, how did you get in and your applications and things like that. So I thought maybe I'll just touch base a little bit on that aspect too, before I
Sure.
take questions. Mentor, no mentor, right? So what difference did, taking, having a mentor make to your application?
Um, See, if I think about it in hindsight, it's not like, there was a magic pill that was given to me and I suddenly was able to write fantastic essays. Or I also don't think that if I hadn't struggled with my essays myself, maybe not this year, but a year or two, I would have learned by trial and error and figure out how to write the perfect essay. But I really didn't want to go through that process. Having a mentor in Arun was a really good sounding board. Yes, he helped me a great deal in terms of flushing out my essays. I remember my first essay was garbage, to be honest. So, but like after going through one or two iterations of my essays, I also started getting some clarity in terms of how do I showcase my skill set, because that's really difficult, right? You've done so much. You think that I've done so much in 5 years. What part should I show? What part should I not show? I've got a strict word limit. Also the why MBA part. I think that's something that Arun really helped me flush out in terms of really understanding why do I want to do an MBA? Do I even want to do an MBA? So that really helped, and it's just good to have somebody as a sounding board. I really didn't want to waste time or effort, especially considering that I already have a company to run. So I took the application services from Crack Verbal to help me with that particular aspect.
Right. So, in terms of, some questions that I have, I'm just flushing, or I'm just looking at a few questions that are
Sure.
posted in the forum here, and I'm just trying to articulate it so that it's more effective for everyone who's listening. In terms of, Rotman, is there like a average age that you see in the class at Rotman? Like, what is the minimum age that you see and what is the maximum that you see at Rotman? So you mentioned about the kind of people with the diverse backgrounds coming into the class, right? So what
Yeah.
is, the age band that you see in the class there?
So I would say majority of the people have anywhere between 3 to 7 years of work experience. Majority of them. I know a bunch of them with, if you're really exceptional, you get in with less than 2 years of work experience or so. Also, I know somebody who's run his own company here in Canada in a different part for 15 years, and now at the age of 39 has decided to do an MBA. So more than age, right? It comes down to figuring out, like, if you ask that person who's 39 and doing an MBA, like, why does he want to do an MBA? He just wants to go back to running a different company. He wants to start a new company, and he believes that Toronto is the place where you have a lot of excitement regarding technology and startups right now, and this is the place he wants to be, and that's what he's doing right now. So age is not a barrier. It just comes down to depending on what you want to do with an MBA and why right now. And if you're very clear with your why MBA at any particular time in your life, you're pretty much fine.
Right. So, Akshat, a lot of people say that, there are some specific schools which are, what do you say, they are specialized in some specific kind of, say, consulting, or they say, this school is great for marketing, or this school is great for finance and consulting. I've heard Rotman is more specialized. I mean, at least that's what most of the articles talk about, that they specialize more in finance and consulting. So how does that work in terms of how it is there at the school?
So when it comes to specialization of B schools, I know that Rotman per se, like Rotman especially, is trying to get away from the tag of being a finance school or a consulting school. For a long time, they were a finance school, and now people are saying now it's a finance and consulting school. But Rotman and schools try to move away from that image. I don't see anything in particular when it comes to what is being taught in the B school that is just tailored to finance or consulting. It's got more to do with the interests of people coming here and also the demographic of the people coming here. A lot of them come here with the goal and agenda that they want to get into finance and consulting. Toronto is the third largest financial market in North America after New York and Chicago. So a lot of people come here with that idea that, yes, I want to get into finance. And that's why you see that skew in terms of more people going towards finance and consulting. Let me give you an example for technology. Like last year, I know that you had more people you had more job offers in the technology space compared to the number of people wanting to get into the tech space at Rotman. So and whereas for consulting and finance is the other way around. You have, say, almost literally everyone in the batch wanting to get into consulting. Out of a batch of 330, at least 250 will be gunning for consulting. And out of that 250, 100 will make it into consulting. So whereas technology, you will have 30 people gunning for tech jobs out there, and you will have 60 jobs available. So it's nothing per se in terms of it's nothing to do with the school. I think it's more to do with the students who end up coming to the school.
Right, right. And I think it also depends on the economy and the kind of jobs that are available. I think,
Exactly.
right? So that depends on that. So in terms of, people applying with Gmat or GRE score, because Rotman accepts both Gmat as well as GRE score, is there any thought you have around that? Or what is more
Um,
preferred or anything of that sort?
I gave the GMAT. By what I know and what I've heard from the admissions team, there is no preference per se. As whichever exam you end up getting a higher score, you're better off. I think there's like a slight difference. I don't know much about the GRE, but by what I know, there's a slight difference in the exam content and what is tested for the GRE and the GMAT. So depending on what you feel comfortable with, I would recommend giving that exam so that you can maximize your chance of getting into Rotman or any B school that accepts both.
Right. Right. So, for the listeners, I just want to tell you, one specific thing is just make sure the questions you ask are things that you cannot already find on the website, especially things like what is the fees and whether it has an analytics course. All this can be found on the website of Rotman. What I would specifically want to answer is more focused on what Akshat can contribute and tell us about his life there, right? So I would like to take those specific questions. So Akshat, I'm just going through a few more questions to
Yeah,
see if.
I see a bunch of questions regarding, opportunities for Indians and international students and jobs here, and that is difficult. So I've gone through the internship process here. I'll just shed some light on it. I've gone through the internship process here. Your recruitment starts in January, and it runs all the way till May. So I had my internship by January end. So I'm going to be interning at Royal Bank of Canada Capital Markets Technology for the summer. And yeah, I if you ask me, right, like if you come to Canada on a PR, just, it's possible. You see a lot of Indians immigrating to Canada by getting a PR and coming here and looking for a job. It's difficult to find a job that way because Canadian companies out here value Canadian education. So it is important that, you get some sort of certification here, uh, some sort of a Canadian education here before you get into the job market. So if you come here just on, your Indian education and work experience, yes, you are going to find it hard finding a job here. But if you come here, you study and then get out here in the job market, yes, people are going to take note of your credentials.
Right, right. So, in terms of your whole admission cycle, right? So, did you actually did any kind of did you reach out to people at Rotman before you got through, or like talking to alumni or something from that aspect?
Uh, Absolutely. So what ended up happening was that I had an opportunity to meet with Ali Morrow, who was the admissions director at Rotman. She'd come down for a QS MBA fair to Bangalore, and that's when I had a chance to meet with her. And after coming to Rotman, one thing that I've really understood is that the admissions team here really values people who meet the admissions team or build these connects with the admissions team face to face, and you significantly improve your chances of getting an admit by doing so. So I would recommend everyone to come, like everyone who's got a chance to get some face time, be it meet them at an MBA fair or set up a Skype session or whatnot. Skype might be difficult because they're really swamped. I would recommend that everyone do that, because that could significantly improve your chances. Yes, you need every other aspect of your application to check boxes, be it your GMAT, your essays, your interview, all of that needs to be done. Like, this is not a substitute for any of it, but this significantly improves your chances. Also, another thing that I feel would improve a student's chances is getting a recommendation from a current student or an alumni. That's something that carries a good amount of weight. Again, it's not a substitute for any of the factors I mentioned before. I did have a chance to speak to Abhinandan. Abhinandan also went via Crack Mobile the year before me to Rotman, and that's how I connected with him. I had a chance to speak with him. Unfortunately, I spoke to him after I'd put him an application, so he wasn't able to refer me. But yeah, the fact that I got FaceTime with Ali Morrow, who was the then admissions director, helped me. Right now, she's at Ivy, but I think right now Imran Kanga is the admissions director here at Rotman.
Right. So at Rotman, do they have, so this is more specific to Canada, right? So US has this 16-year, credit that they require, which is 12 plus 4. Canada doesn't have anything of that sort, right? So people with 3 years graduation can also apply.
Absolutely. People with 3 years graduation can apply. If I'm not sure if it's mentioned on the website or not, but I know people with the standard commerce degree in India, which is a 3-year degree, coming here and actually doing an MBA. So it's not an issue.
Right. And Rotman also has one more thing where if you have done your CFA level 1 and 2, you can actually apply directly. Is that correct, Akshat?
I think it's CFA level 1, 2, and 3. So if you have finished, if you're a CFA level 1, 2, 3 clear, then you don't need to give the GMAT.
Right. Cool. So, I'll just go through some questions again to see if there's anything very specific we could answer.
Absolutely.
Right. So, so one thing I just want to tell, all of you is focus on the first thing, which is most important, which is GMAT, right? So let me just take a quick poll here to understand how many of you have, are in this GMAT journey and what level are you? So if you could just take this poll to let us know how many of you have taken GMAT or still preparing or not started. Cool. So good to see that a lot of people are in the preparation stage. So if people who are still thinking and need help or not started, please make sure that you start now. It's high time, because it's important that you apply as soon as possible and you have enough time for the application part also. So if you look at the entire process of getting to a top B school, right? The most important aspect, or the phase 1, I would say, is getting your GMAT scores in place, or GRE, whichever you take. The second aspect is once you get your GMAT or GRE scores in place, it's important that you understand your profile well to choose the right schools you would want to apply to. Once you have the schools in mind, you have to make sure that you put enough and good effort in applying, focusing on your essays, because every aspect of your application, as Akshat said, is equally important. So GMAT is important, GMAT or GRE is important. At the same time, how you actually articulate and put your application in a strong way, which is with respect to why you really want to do an MBA and what you have done so far, and how does it map to what you eventually want to do. So that's also a very important part of your applications. Ideally, so Akshat, how long do you think it takes normally, more from a excuse me, student perspective, right? How long does it take for to apply to, so craft an application, I would say, from the start of thinking through the questions to the time you actually write your applications? What is the timeline do you think is required?
So you're talking only about the application process, right? Not the GMAT.
Yes, only the
Okay.
application.
So one of the things that surprised me during my entire application journey was the fact that the application part was much more uh, time taking and strenuous than the GMAT prep. I really underestimated the amount of effort that I would have to put for the application. I would say it took me a month just to think about what do I want to even accomplish with my MBA, why do an MBA, just get all of that really clear, because those are the kind of questions that literally every B school out there ask in their essay in some form or the other. And those are the kind of questions that you can also expect in every interview. So that is one thing that took me a lot of time. And then after that, when it came to writing essays, the first school took me a month again, just the first school. After that, you start speeding up. The next school would take you shorter, and subsequently so on. You just have to put in lesser and lesser effort because you get better at it. But just getting that first school's essay right took me 2 months, right from the stage of starting to think about the entire essay process to getting those final drafts ready. It took me 2 or 3 drafts to get that final essay ready.
Right. So, just to summarize what Akshat said, it's important that you put in all your focus in your applications too. So GMAT is just phase one, I would say. Application is also very, very important. So just make sure you put in enough effort on the application aspect too. Right. So I'm just going through a few more questions. Let me just check if there is anything that is relevant that we could answer. Again, so one of them is asking about, what is the average GMAT score? So let me just tell you one thing. Like Akshat said, every part of your application is important. So even if the website says 550 and you have a stellar profile, maybe with the 550 you can get in. But it's not like how we call, like cutoffs in India. Right. So it's if you have a 98% cutoff, everyone over that actually gets a chance to get through. That's not how it works. Every aspect of you is important. They look at your complete profile to, actually look at and admit. Right, Akshat, your thoughts?
Absolutely. So I've been helping a few students out. Like I've just spoken to a few students, not even helping them out, who wanted to get some perspective on what the Rotman MBA is like. A lot of them applied in this particular year. And one thing that I've seen is that there's very little correlation between your performance in the GMAT versus who gets an admit and who doesn't get an admit. Yes, a strong GMAT score does help, and especially if you have chinks in the armor in other particular aspect. But I know somebody with a 760 GMAT who didn't get an admit. I know somebody with a 640 GMAT who's got an admit. Both of them Indians, and both of them very similar. You talk about your Indian IT engineer male, that particular profile with such different GMAT scores, but the one with the 640 got an admit, the one with the 760 did. So there's a lot more going on behind the scenes besides your GMAT score. And yeah, I'd say do well in that exam, because that's something that then you have one less thing to worry about. But if you do well in that exam, don't take your eye off the ball. You still have to focus on the other aspects. They're very important.
Right. Someone here has asked about, your interview experience at Rotman. So, any thoughts around that? Like, how was your interview taken? Was it on Skype or was it in person?
My interview was on Skype. I interviewed with Ali Moro, whom I met at the QSMBA fair in Bangalore. And yeah, I think I was the last person she interviewed. After that, she moved to Ivy. So it was pretty standard, your usual why MBA, why Rotman. I think one of the core aspects that they really focus on is why Rotman, because a lot of them want to understand that you're applying to Rotman as one of your you know why you're applying to Rotman, and you don't have it as a backup school to some of the US schools out there. So they want that you've really thought about what part of Rotman really draws you towards this particular school and why you want to come here. So that is something that I would recommend everyone get, just have a clear picture of. Besides that, it was pretty standard. You'll have your behavioral questions. You will have your situational questions, which would be that the typical tell me about a time format questions that you see. And it was a 30-minute interview, and yeah, it was pretty relaxed. It wasn't a stress interview at all. None of that nonsense. Yeah.
Right. Great. So thanks, Akshat. I think I've covered most of the questions, which is more relevant to the session here. I see a lot of people, asking specific questions with respect to their profile. I just want to, so there is this course that we have put together. It's called the MBA Kickstarter Kit. You can just use this link. Let me just try copying this link. Give me a second. Right, so I'll just put this link. So just make sure you use the coupon code $1 to actually they use this. So this has, very good information on why do you really need to do an MBA. It gives you an information about geographies across top schools. The whole idea is to make sure that before you actually get started with your application process, you need to understand these few aspects, or I would say the 101 questions that you have in your mind, because most of you are asking these kind of questions. So just make sure you go through this course, and you will definitely get a very good idea of how you need to take this forward in terms of profile fitment, in terms of the different kind of job roles you could get into. So this is definitely you should look at. Use the coupon code $1. As I said, this is a $69 course, which is priced at $1 for all those who are attending the webinar today. So just make sure you go through this. Apart from that, for people who are looking at, getting your profile evaluated, just fill in this. I will just copy that link too. You can just fill in this form. Again, I see a lot of people asking more profile-based questions. So just make sure you, fill in this profile, because we would be able to help you understand if you are an older applicant, what are the kind of questions you have, and, help you understand how strong or what else could you do to actually apply to top schools such as Rotman. Right. So thank you so much, Akshat, for being here. I know it's really late for you. So guys, it's almost post midnight for Akshat, but thank you so much for being here and being part of this webinar. And it's really been very, very informative, and we've kind of covered most of the things, and we've got a very, very good understanding of how life there at Rotman is. We wish you a lot of luck, going forward. I'm sure, you will do wonders, and, we'll definitely keep in touch. So thank you guys. Thanks all of you. Just make sure you get your profile evaluated so that we can help you better. And, again, thank you so much, Akshat, for this wonderful webinar.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Akshat. Thanks. Bye-bye. Thank you, guys.